Some bikes are fast, some are powerful, and then there are these bikes so dangerous that they've broken bones, shattered records, and earned nicknames like the Widowmaker. Here are the 10 deadliest motorcycles known to mankind. Number 10, Honda CX500 Turbo, 1982.
But back in the 1980s, the use of turbochargers.
Starting our countdown at number 10 is a bike that proves even Honda, the king of reliability, could create a monster when they tried too hard to innovate. The Honda CX500 Turbo was Honda's bold attempt to bring turbocharging to the masses, but what they created was a wolf in sheep's clothing. The problem wasn't the concept, it was the execution. Honda took their mild-mannered CX500 platform and strapped a turbocharger to it, creating a machine that could unleash devastating power without warning. The bike's frame and suspension were never designed to handle the explosive force that a turbocharger could deliver. For unsuspecting riders who saw the Honda badge and expected their usual reliable, predictable ride, the CX500 Turbo was a nasty surprise. The turbo lag meant you'd roll on the throttle, feel nothing, then suddenly get hit with a brutal surge of power that could tear the handlebars from your grip. Many riders found themselves unprepared for this, leading to countless crashes and close calls. The illusion of safety was perhaps the most dangerous aspect of all. Honda's reputation for building beginner-friendly motorcycles led many inexperienced riders to choose the CX500 Turbo, completely unaware they were climbing aboard a ticking time bomb. Number 9, Kawasaki GPZ 750 Turbo, 1983.
Full and refined, yet not revolutionary. And that's when
Moving up to number 9, we have another turbo terror that plagued the early 1980s. The Kawasaki GPZ 750 Turbo represented Kawasaki's answer to Honda's turbocharged experiment. But if anything, they made the problem even worse. The GPZ 750 Turbo suffered from all the classic turbo issues of the era, magnified by Kawasaki's more aggressive approach. The turbo lag was even more pronounced than Honda's attempt, creating a power delivery that was nothing short of violent. Riders would find themselves cruising along peacefully, only to have the turbo suddenly spool up and launch them forward with the force of a rocket sled. But the power surge wasn't the only problem. The addition of the turbocharger made the bike significantly heavier, throwing off the handling characteristics entirely. Worse still, the cooling system couldn't cope with the massive heat generated by the turbocharged engine, leading to frequent overheating and potential engine failures at the worst possible moments. The GPZ 750 Turbo demanded absolute respect and perfect throttle control, qualities that many riders of the era simply didn't possess. In the hands of an expert, it was a formidable machine. In the hands of anyone else, it was a recipe for disaster. Number 8, Suzuki TM400 Cyclone, 1971. At number 8, we travel back to the early days of motocross with the Suzuki TM400 Cyclone, a bike that perfectly embodied the more power, less sense philosophy of early dirt bike design. The TM400 Cyclone was essentially Suzuki's attempt to stuff the largest possible engine into the lightest possible frame. The result was a 396cc two-stroke monster that weighed almost nothing but delivered power like a much larger machine. On paper, it sounds perfect. In reality, it was a handling nightmare. The lightweight frame simply wasn't designed to cope with the violent power delivery of that massive two-stroke single. The bike would flex and twist under acceleration, creating an unpredictable, terrifying ride that could spit you off without warning. The power band was brutally narrow and aggressive. If you hit the power, you better be prepared for an instant launch into orbit. What made the TM400 Cyclone particularly dangerous was its deceptive nature. New riders often gravitated towards lighter bikes, thinking they'd be easier to handle. The TM400 looked like a beginner-friendly machine, but it had the temperament of a wild animal. Many inexperienced riders learned the hard way that lightweight doesn't always mean manageable. Even experienced riders had to be constantly on guard. The power delivery was so unpredictable that you never knew if your next twist of the throttle would result in a gentle acceleration or a violent wheelie that could throw you backwards off the bike. Number 7. Vincent Black Shadow, 1948. At number 7, we encounter our first vintage death trap, the Vincent Black Shadow. This British masterpiece was undoubtedly one of the most beautiful motorcycles ever created, but beauty and safety were clearly unrelated concepts in 1948. The Black Shadow was a speed demon for its time, capable of hitting 125 miles per hour when most cars struggled to reach 80. But Vincent's engineers seem to forget that going fast is only half the equation. You also need to be able to stop and turn. The chassis was woefully inadequate for the bike's performance potential. It flexed like a wet noodle under hard acceleration or aggressive cornering, creating a feeling that the bike was literally coming apart beneath you. The handling was unpredictable at best, terrifying at worst. Then there were the brakes, or rather, the lack of effective brakes. The Vincent Black Shadow came equipped with drum brakes that belonged on a bicycle, not a 125 mile per hour missile. Riders often found themselves approaching corners at speeds their brakes simply couldn't handle, leading to numerous off-road excursions and worse. The suspension was equally problematic, being so rigid that every bump in the road was transmitted directly to the rider's spine. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous, as the harsh suspension would bounce the wheels off the ground, causing momentary losses of control at the worst possible moments. Number 6. Brough Superior SS100.
Kind of feel like Lawrence of Arabia, you're kicking up again.
1924. Here's the answer to our question. The Brough Superior SS100 coming in at number 6 on our list of mechanical menaces. The SS100 was the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles in its day, handcrafted and incredibly expensive. But all that craftsmanship couldn't overcome the fundamental safety limitations of 1924 technology. This was an era when safety equipment meant a leather helmet and maybe some goggles if you were feeling fancy. The SS100 had virtually no safety features by modern standards. The brakes were primitive, the tires had minimal grip, and the chassis was about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. The suspension was so harsh that hitting a pothole felt like being hit by a sledgehammer. What made the SS100 particularly treacherous was its unpredictable handling. The bike could be cruising along peacefully one moment, then suddenly develop a violent wobble that would threaten to throw the rider into the nearest ditch. Emergency maneuvers were nearly impossible, as the bike's handling was so twitchy that any sudden input could result in disaster. Despite its reputation as a gentleman's motorcycle, the SS100 was an equal opportunity hazard. It didn't matter if you were a seasoned rider or a novice. This bike could bite you when you least expected it. Today, surviving examples are priceless collector's items, but they're definitely not machines you'd want to rely on for daily transportation. Number 5. Harley-Davidson V-Rod, 2002. Wait, it's a Harley-Davidson on this list. That's hard to believe, but there's a good reason it earned its spot.
I will meet you at the graveyard, where you lay down, where you stay now, face the cold, I'm no longer on the side, wish we were together.
The V-Rod was Harley-Davidson's controversial departure from tradition. While most Harley riders were used to laid-back cruising and predictable handling, the V-Rod was a completely different beast that caught many riders off guard. The V-Rod's biggest problem was its identity crisis. It looked like a Harley, wore Harley badges, and was sold to Harley customers, but it handled nothing like a traditional Harley-Davidson motorcycle. This bike was extremely low to the ground, with a design that prioritized straight-line performance over cornering ability. This created a dangerous situation for riders who expected typical Harley characteristics. The V-Rod would scrape its belly pan in corners that a traditional Harley could take with ease. Worse, when the belly pan did scrape, it could cause the bike to slide out unexpectedly, often with disastrous results. The bike's stability at high speeds was also questionable. While it was rock solid in a straight line, the V-Rod could become unpredictable when pushed hard through twisty roads. The low center of gravity that made it stable at low speeds became a liability when cornering aggressively. Many experienced Harley riders found themselves in trouble simply because they approached the V-Rod with traditional Harley expectations. The bike demanded a completely different riding style, and those who didn't adapt quickly often paid the price. Number 4. Yamaha V-Max, 1985. Coming in at number 4 is the Yamaha V-Max, a bike that defined the term muscle bike and proved that sometimes too much power in the wrong package can be lethal. The V-Max was essentially a drag strip refugee masquerading as a street bike. It was designed for one thing: brutal, straight-line acceleration. The V-Max could launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour faster than most supercars, but that incredible performance came with a deadly catch. The bike's short gearing and massive torque meant that any mistake with the throttle could result in an instant, uncontrollable wheelie. Inexperienced riders often found themselves flying backwards off the bike before they even realized what happened. The power delivery was so aggressive that it left absolutely no room for error. Cornering was where the V-Max truly showed its dangerous side. The bike's geometry was optimized for straight-line performance, making it sluggish and unpredictable in turns. The low-mounted fuel tank gave it a deceptively low center of gravity, but this actually made the bike harder to lean into corners and more likely to low side when pushed too hard. The V-Max demanded absolute respect from its rider. Any momentary lapse in concentration, any slight mistake in throttle control could result in a trip to the hospital. It was a bike that rewarded skill and punished mistakes with equal brutality. Number 3. Suzuki TL1000S, 1997. At number 3, we have the Suzuki TL1000S. While it packed impressive power in a relatively affordable package, the TL1000S had handling characteristics that could turn lethal without warning. The TL1000S's biggest problem was its nervous, unstable handling. The bike had a tendency to develop a violent wobble at high speeds, particularly when accelerating hard or hitting bumps. This wobble, known as a tank slapper, could escalate rapidly from an annoying vibration to a bike-destroying rider ejecting catastrophe. The irregular power delivery made matters worse. Like many bikes of its era, the TL1000S had a non-linear power band that could catch riders off guard. You might be cruising along thinking you had the bike under control, only to have a sudden surge of power upset the chassis and trigger one of those infamous wobbles. Perhaps most dangerously, the TL1000S came without modern safety features like ABS or traction control. This meant that when things went wrong, and they often did, riders were completely on their own. There were no electronic systems to help regain control, no safety nets to prevent a crash. The bike's reputation became so notorious that Suzuki was forced to redesign it significantly for the following model year. But by then, the damage was done, and the TL1000S had already earned its place in motorcycling infamy. Before we reveal our top 2 most dangerous motorcycles, there was this 1970s bike so violent and unpredictable that it was nicknamed the Widowmaker, and is still considered one of the most terrifying two-strokes ever built. And it's coming up next in our top 2. Number 2, Kawasaki H2 750, the Widowmaker, 1972.
This would really define Kawasaki's business plan going forward, while other manufacturers like Honda.
This bike didn't just earn its nickname through marketing hyperbole. It literally left a trail of widows in its wake. The H2 750 was a 750cc two-stroke triple that delivered power like a barely controlled explosion. The bike could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds. Incredible performance for 1972, but terrifying power delivery that caught countless riders off guard. The two-stroke power band was notoriously unforgiving. The engine would seem docile at low RPMs, then suddenly explode into violent life as it hit the power band. This sudden surge of power would lift the front wheel skyward without warning, often throwing unprepared riders backwards off the bike. But the power wasn't even the worst part. It was the brakes. The H2 750 came equipped with drum brakes that belonged on a bicycle, not a motorcycle capable of 120 plus miles per hour. Riders would find themselves screaming towards corners at speeds their brakes simply couldn't handle. The combination of explosive acceleration and pathetic stopping power was a recipe for disaster. The frame flex made matters even worse. Under hard acceleration, the H2's chassis would flex and twist like a wet noodle, creating unpredictable handling that could send the bike into wobble at any moment. The bike was fast in a straight line, but trying to corner its speed was like playing Russian roulette. The H2 750 was so dangerous that even experienced riders approached it with fear and respect. For inexperienced riders, it was often a death sentence disguised as a motorcycle. But wait, you might think the Kawasaki H2 750 would be our #1 most dangerous motorcycle. After all, it literally earned the nickname Widowmaker. But there's one bike that was even more terrifying, even more unpredictable, and even more likely to kill its rider. A bike so brutal that it makes the H2 look gentle. Number 1, Maico 700, 1980s.
100 when Maico themselves disappeared a lot.
Taking the top spot on our list of the most dangerous motorcycles ever built is the Maico 700. A machine so violent and unpredictable that it makes everything else on this list look like children's toys. The Maico 700 was originally built in the mid-1980s as the ultimate dirt bike, then resurrected in 2009 and produced in tiny numbers until 2014. Variants are still occasionally built today, and versions of its engine dominate sidecar cross championships worldwide. This was possibly the most terrifying two-stroke single-cylinder motorcycle ever created. The engine displaced up to 760cc in some variants, and at just 100 kilograms, it produced over 80 horsepower. To put that in perspective, this bike had a better power-to-weight ratio than most modern supercars, but with none of the electronic controls or safety systems. The massive two-stroke single produced so much torque that it was virtually impossible to control, regardless of how gentle your throttle hand was. The power delivery was so violent and unpredictable that even the slightest twist of the wrist could result in an immediate, uncontrollable wheelie that would launch you backwards into orbit. The chassis wasn't the problem with the Maico 700, it was actually quite good. The engine was just so brutally powerful that no human being could hope to control it consistently. Even professional riders approached the Maico 700 with extreme caution, knowing that one small mistake could be their last. The fact that the engine is still used in sidecar cross racing today, where it has a sidecar to help control it, tells you everything you need to know about its power. Even with 300 plus pounds of sidecar attached, the Maico engine will still tear your arms off given the slightest chance. Very few motorcycles have ever offered the kind of pure, unadulterated adrenaline rush that came from riding a Maico 700. But that rush came with a very real risk of death. For those brave enough to twist the throttle on a Maico 700, survival was never guaranteed. It was a bike that separated the truly skilled from everyone else, often permanently. So, there you have it, the 10 most dangerous motorcycles ever unleashed upon the world. But here's my question for you. If you could ride any one of these dangerous motorcycles for just one day, knowing the risks involved, which would you choose and why? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this countdown of mechanical mayhem, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into motorcycling's wildest, most dangerous, and most fascinating machines.